then when we talk about why we need to define AT needs and why is that so important for students with disabilities, and you all, if you're here, I know that many of you know all of this already, but we really need to think about FAPE and the least restrictive environment. So, for example, FAPE, free, appropriate public education. We found this really great document that just talks about the general information about FAPE. And I think this is just a great resource that you can share with teams and teachers about why you're providing some of the resources as the supports that are needed for students. Sometimes we'll get from teachers, well, if you give them a word prediction, that's cheating. They don't have to think as hard to spell a word. But if they're going to spend 3 hours trying to spell one word, what is the goal of that assignment or that project? So really thinking about what is appropriate and fair for that student to be receiving FAPE, right? And then least restrictive environment. This one is so interesting, right? Because it means that kids get special education to be in the same classroom as other kids as much as possible. It's more about that principle that helps guide where and students are supposed to be. And it may look different because every student is unique. So some students who may have the same disability may have totally different LRE or totally different circumstances of what their environments might look like. So for example, we have a student right now in Madison schools who has spinal muscular atrophy, and she is a student who is at home and cannot be at school due to her medical condition. But we have set up a robot for her to be at school via the robot. So instead of having a homebound teacher on a regular basis, we've figured out that the least restrictive environment for her actually is her attending school via robot remotely. So she is actually in her regular ed classroom navigating a robot around the classroom and participating in that way, and is getting the same access as her peers to the education that is available to her. So we're not needing to do as much customizing as we had in the past for her to get special education and homebound teacher services outside of her in her home environment on all occasions. Yes, there are circumstances where her health may have something that we would have to change, but when we think about it in general, we're looking at that least restrictive environment, and in her case, that's a great example of how we've been providing the least restrictive environment.
Awesome. Barbara just shared that they've done the same with some of their students with similar diagnoses.
Yay! Are you using a
Mm-hmm.
robot too? Barbara, are you using robots in
Yeah.
your district? Okay.
No, we're not using the robot, but we have iPads on a rolling a mounted stand. So they Google Meet or Zoom in for all of their instruction, and then we're able to move the iPad wherever we need it.
That's awesome.
That's so great.
Probably a lot more affordable for your district too.
Yeah, it is a little more affordable than the robot.
And
nice.
Laura mentioned doing a Chromebook on a moving stand.
That's great.
And I love that you mentioned that too, because when I talk about the robots, they're definitely a lot of investment, and there's training components that go into that, right? But it's also, there's always backup plans. If that's the least restrictive environment for a student, for example, you're mentioning the iPad, we know that technology isn't always perfect, right? And iPads go down, things don't get charged at the end of the day, they get knocked over, they get broken. So always having a second backup is also really important, because we're really talking about a need a student has, and so we can't have the option of them not being at school. So for almost every one of our students, we always have a technology backup for their specific needs. And Carly will talk about this with AAC as well, right, Carly? When it comes to even the AAC technology, even having a light tech version of their communication boards is also really important. Because it's a need for students. If their voice is unavailable because they forgot to charge it, we need to have a backup plan.
I always,
yeah.
Yeah, no, I always encourage therapists who have a student on a high-tech device to at least print that top page if they have a dynamic device. At least have something printed out. I mean, it would be ideal if they could print the whole thing. It might be a lot of paper. Just in case that device needs to be sent back and repaired. We don't want to leave them without any way to communicate, even if it is not as efficient way to have a paper copy.
Yeah, and depending on the amount of students in our district that are on a specific caseload for a speech and language pathologist, we do have SLPs who will have a student's communication boards within their with like on their device as well, or access to them. We've also tried to do backups into Google Drive. If other people have other ideas that you've done, share them here, please. We
Please.
love extra ideas, but trying to figure out ways that people are still being able to model and show students how to use their communication devices in just having those backups in multiple places. We also have at each of our schools, we have AT toolkits. So we have an iPad at each school, and there's some schools where students are, I would say, have more challenges getting their devices to school or having them regularly charged. So in that case, we use those toolkit iPads to really keep some of those as backups on those devices. Um, but yes. All right. All right. So when we talk about where to start, how do we start to think about the needs for assistive technology? The assistive students need, or Carly, I think I wrote that wrong. The students' need
Oh,
for assistive technology. Assessing,
assessing.
thank you. Assessing students' needs for assistive technology. This is this is a screenshot on it of it, but you can click either on the words here or on the actual picture, and it will pop up with the. This is from Wadi, and there are many pages of information, which is a lot to look through. So Carly was so kind to pick out a few of the key things to think about when we're thinking about needs. So, questions to consider when you're thinking about the needs for assistive technology.
Yes. So you'd want to first think about what task is it that we want them to be able to do. And to make sure that you're matching that level, it reflects their skills, their abilities. What do they need to be doing at their current grade level or just level of the room that they're in? You also want to consider, is the student currently able to complete the tasks with strategies or accommodations? Like, do they need something extra? Are they already providing that, already able to access what they need to with just the supports in place? Or is there like an extra boost they need? Three is about, is there currently AT used to address this task? So if there is, and we'll get to this a little bit later on, if there is, that absolutely needs to be in the IEP, if that's already being used and needed. And four is, would the use of AT help the student perform these skills more easily or efficiently in the least restrictive environment? So just like we have talked about with our students who are using robots or technology like that, is it the best way and the easiest way for them to be able to perform and meet IEP goals?
So, I think the really important thing there that I take out of a lot of these is less personal assistance or increased independence, right? So, what are we doing to help the student become more independent in their skills? And so that's where we really define what becomes a need for a student.
Yes. Oh, Kathy. Yes. Thanks for bringing that up. You can get TD Snap for free if you are a professional and working with kids. You can get there. I think they call it TD for professionals.
And I know that if you ask them and you're not an SLP, you can also get it.
Yes.
So,
They're
yeah.
very willing.
Yeah. There are so many ideas that are out there for supporting with feature matching. And so if other people have other ideas that we don't talk about in the presentation, please share them in the chat, because I know there's more that people can, that people might use that we would love to share ideas. So this feature match comparison chart is one example of just things that become required or wish list features. So what I love about that is just thinking about something that's required, that's a need, and that wish list is kind of like that benefit like area. Like it would benefit them and it would be cool and it would be an awesome addition, but it's not required or they don't need it. So when you talk about all these things that are needed for a student, this is just a really great chart, an example chart to start comparing different devices. It goes all the way to access. Well, how is the student accessing it? The type of keyboard. Is it mountable? Does it need to be mountable? What's the weight? What are the power sources? Is it rechargeable? Does it require regular batteries? Other environmental control options. So you can even list the devices. So comparing a few different devices if you're working with a student to determine what resource or support um, might be the best choice for a student. Um, so this is just one tool that we like to share.
Yes,
then,
and I wanted to highlight super quick, Anna, that Barbara said that in the chat that for Google Read and Write, you can get a premium account if you're a school professional.
Thank you for that reminder. Yes, we still need to look at that information that's free out there because as teachers, we've got a lot on our plate. So making sure we know where the free stuff is really important too, and the most efficient and the most affordable.